"Emily, do you want some more bread?" I had just finished asking when there was a light touch under the table. My husband's shoe. I thought he was just shifting his position, so I didn't look down. The meal kept its rhythm. The pasta was still hot. The news on the TV kept murmuring in the background. Her mother was talking about work. "No, thank you," Emily replied, a little too quickly. She lowered her head, her hand tightening around her fork. My husband glanced at her, very quickly. I caught that exact moment. A brief look, but not a polite one. It felt like two people quietly confirming something between them. I kept eating. I didn't say anything. I didn't want the whole table to stall because of a feeling I couldn't yet name. Then the second touch happened. This time I saw it clearly. His foot shifted slightly under the table, the tip of his shoe touching her leg. Not an accident. On purpose. Emily froze and set her fork down. "I'm full," she said, her voice low. "Have a little more," he said, his tone perfectly normal. His hand still held the fork, his eyes stayed on his plate, as if his foot hadn't done anything at all. Her mother didn't notice. She kept talking. She kept smiling. I smiled too. I nodded at the right moments. I let the meal go on as if nothing had happened. But in my head, one thought became very clear. It wasn't the first time they had done that. I wasn't certain enough to conclude anything, but I was no longer naive enough to tell myself I had imagined it. And from that moment on, I knew I needed to stay silent. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to watch very carefully. My name is Lauren Hayes. I am 43 years old. From the outside, my life looked like what people call stable. Nothing flashy, just proper, orderly, in rhythm, everything a middle-class suburban American family tries hard to maintain. A clean house, a structured routine, dinners at the same hour, weekends planned in advance, and a husband everyone thought was exemplary. My husband is Michael Hayes. He is successful, polite, soft-spoken, with the kind of presence people describe using words like mature and reliable. In the eyes of society, Michael is the kind of man you meet at a corporate party or a school fundraiser. You nod, smile politely, and think the woman beside him must be very lucky. Michael knows how to stand in the right position in every frame. I mean that literally. He always adjusts his cuffs, always looks straight ahead when shaking hands, always knows when to stay quiet so others assume he is thoughtful. I used to see that as maturity. I used to think that was stability. The woman I trusted the most, however, was not Michael. It was Angela Brooks. Angela is my closest friend. A friendship that has lasted long enough that you no longer try to impress each other. We met when we were young, when neither of us had anything solid yet, before titles like wife, mother, or the woman holding an entire household existed. Angela is a widow. She lives quietly. She speaks little, not the kind of person who enters a room and turns heads, but the kind who sits quietly in a corner and still makes you remember she is there, because she is present in the right way. Angela raised her daughter alone, Emily Brooks. Emily grew up in a home with only her mother, and although Angela rarely complained, I could clearly see the exhaustion in the way she tried to carry both roles. When you watch a woman raise a child alone for a long time, you understand why she learns not to rely on anyone, and also why you, as a close friend, naturally want to stand a little closer. I loved Emily like my own child. Not the kind of love said for appearance, but the kind where you genuinely care about every small thing. I supported her education. I asked what major she wanted to choose. I introduced her to an internship so she could gain experience. I let her stay with me when she studied far from home, so Angela would worry less about rent, and so Emily would not have to juggle everything alone in a strange city. I took her out to eat, to shop. I showed her how to choose an interview outfit that was professional, without making her look older than her age. I showed her how to write a thank you email after an interview. I showed her how not to apologize too much when she was not wrong, because I know young girls tend to do that. To me, Emily was not an outsider. She was the kind of child you watch grow up, and then one day you are startled to realize she is no longer a child. Angela and Emily became part of my life very naturally, partly because I genuinely cared about them, partly because I trusted them. I trusted in a way that did not require fences. I did not doubt. I did not guard myself. I did not check. I did not see kindness as something conditional. I simply believed this was the safest family I had. Michael was my husband. Angela was my closest friend. Emily was the child I had protected. Those 4 words, at the time, sounded as solid as a promise. I used to believe that if something bad happened in my life, it would come from outside. An accident, a work crisis, something unexpected that I could not control. I never imagined the worst thing would come from the people I trusted the most, in the quietest way, using the very thing I had given most freely, my trust. Emily Brooks grew up right in front of my eyes, from a skinny little girl who used to curl up in the back seat of my car every time I drove her and her mother out to dinner, into a beautiful, intelligent young woman who knew how to make the person across from her feel heard. She grew up without a father. Angela never said it out loud, but I could see it clearly in the way Emily constantly sought validation from older men. I understood that feeling. I had been that child once. I cared about Emily not out of pity, but because I saw myself in her. I helped her with school, introduced her to her first internship, let her stay with me when she went to school far from home, took her shopping for interview clothes, sat for hours in a coffee shop near campus just so she would have someone to walk her home safely. I never thought I was doing anything dangerous. In my mind back then, Emily was family, the daughter of the woman I trusted most. My husband, Michael Hayes, is the kind of man people trust easily. He speaks slowly, his voice low, always seeming to listen even when he is not fully paying attention. He is experienced, knows how to give advice without making others feel talked down to. That is why people gravitate toward him, and also why I never questioned it when he spoke with Emily more than basic courtesy. At first, it was only small interactions, messages that sounded like an adult checking in on someone younger. How was school today? How is the internship going? Do you need a ride if I am heading that way? Completely harmless on the surface. I even felt reassured, thinking at least she had a decent male role model to learn from. Looking back, it was a very naive thought, the kind that only exists when you trust the ground beneath your feet too much. Michael sometimes drove Emily places when I was busy. I saw nothing strange in it. At 43, I no longer felt jealous over small things. I trusted my marriage. I trusted my closest friend. I believed there were boundaries everyone understood without needing to say them out loud. Until that dinner, a completely ordinary dinner. I cooked pasta. Angela brought salad. Michael opened the wine. Emily set the table. 4 people. A family I believed was absolutely safe. We sat around the familiar wooden table. The evening news played softly on the television. Everything felt normal. Too normal for anyone to be on guard. Under the table, there was a light kick. I thought it was accidental. I kept talking about work. Then I saw Michael and Emily's eyes meet. Very quickly, just a split second. But enough for me to know it was not accidental. It was the look of 2 people sharing something the third did not know. The next kick came right after. This time it touched my leg. Clear. Impossible to mistake. Nothing in the room changed. No one said anything. Michael kept eating. Emily lowered her head. Angela did not notice. I said nothing. I learned long ago that the most important moments in life often arrive very quietly, and if you react too early, you lose the chance to understand what is really happening. I kept eating. I nodded at the right moments. I smiled when I needed to. My expression did not change. But in my mind, a door had closed. Not the door of trust, but the door of innocence. From that night on, I started looking at everything more closely. Not with suspicion, but with the clarity of someone who has lived long enough to know that no betrayal begins with a dramatic shock. It always starts with very small things, so small that you have to remind yourself not to make a big deal out of them. I treated Emily the same. I stayed close to Angela. I lived with Michael like a normal wife. But one thing had changed. I no longer ignored details I would have brushed off before as my own overthinking. I remembered. I did not judge. I did not conclude. I just remembered. And that was when I understood something very American, very real. When a woman stops speaking, it is not always because she is weak. Sometimes it is because she is gathering enough reasons to never have to say another word again. After that dinner, I said nothing. I still cleared the table, still washed the dishes, still listened to Angela talk about small, everyday things like she always did. Nothing in the house felt outwardly different, but something very small had slipped out of place, like a wall clock that was still running, just one beat slower. Michael began to change in ways that were hard to name. Not the kind of change that shocks you, just small details, the kind only someone who has lived with a man for 20 years would notice. He came home later, not late enough to require an explanation, just late enough for dinner to go cold, just late enough for me to reheat food, just late enough for our daily conversations to be cut short. His phone changed too. It used to sit on the kitchen counter next to his car keys. Now it stayed in his pocket or face down on the table. When a message came in, he glanced at it quickly, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly, then put the phone away as if he did not want to extend the moment by even a second. I did not ask. I just took note. He also grew more irritable. Not angry, just short answers, unexplained sighs, looks that made me feel as if I had asked something unnecessary. I did not react. In marriage, reacting too early often means giving up your position. Emily changed in a different way. In front of her mother, Angela, she was still polite, well-behaved, measured, but when it was just the two of us in a room or when we crossed paths in the hallway, her eyes looked away very quickly. Not shy, evasive. I asked her ordinary questions about school, about her internship, about meals. She answered fully, but she did not look at me. She looked at her glass, her phone, the floor. I recognized it was not distraction. It was guilt. Angela remained the same, still warm, still trusting, still thanking me for helping Emily. That normalcy should have reassured me. Instead, it made me pay closer attention. Because if something is happening and a mother does not see it, either it is being hidden very well, or she does not want to look. I did not draw conclusions. I let everything stay where it was. The truth did not come from an argument. It came from something very ordinary. I gathered Michael's clothes for the laundry, like I always did, a habit so familiar it required no thought. When I checked the pocket of his suit jacket, my fingers touched something small and soft. I pulled it out. A lip balm. Used? The cap slightly loose, not the kind I use. I know exactly what I use, where I buy it, and I have never changed brands. I stood still for a few seconds, not shocked, not angry. Just the moment when all the pieces in my head arranged themselves on their own. I placed the lip balm on the table. When Michael came home, I chose the right moment to ask. Not when he was tired. Not when the house was full. I held it up and asked, my voice as neutral as if I were asking about a utility bill. Michael, this was in the pocket of your suit jacket. Whose is it? He glanced at it quickly and answered smoothly. I bought it for you. No explanation, no question about where I found it. A short, polished answer, as if it had been prepared in advance. I did not argue. I did not say I had never used it. I did not ask when or where he bought it. I simply nodded. But in my mind, one thing was confirmed with absolute clarity. I had never used it, and he knew I had never used it. I kept doing the laundry, kept cooking, kept living as usual. But from that moment on, the kick under the table, the exchanged glances, and the lip balm in Michael's suit pocket were no longer separate details. They connected into one very clear line. I was no longer a wife telling herself she was overthinking. I was someone who had realized that some clues do not need to be named. They only require enough patience to be seen side by side. I did not say anything to Angela at that time. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to test one thing before opening my mouth. I needed to know where her boundary was, between friendship and a mother's instinct. If I asked directly, I would only get a safe answer. So I chose the lightest way, speaking as if joking, but placing the blade in exactly the right spot. That afternoon was ordinary. Angela stopped by after work. She brought a bag of pre-made salad from the nearby grocery store, the kind of food busy people buy when they want to look like they are still holding it together. We sat at the kitchen table. I made coffee. She talked about small things, coworkers complaining, a difficult boss, how Emily was doing in school. I listened, nodded, smiled occasionally. Everything looked exactly like any other afternoon. When the conversation naturally slowed, I dropped a line as if casually venting. I did not look directly at Angela. I said, "If one day I caught my husband cheating, do you think I should tear that woman's face apart?" The words landed on the table like a coin, not heavy, but enough to shift the air. Angela set her coffee cup down harder than usual, the sound sharp. She looked up at me. Her expression moved from warm to tense, as if I had switched on a breaking news channel inside her head. Then Angela started talking. I did not prompt her. She cursed women who go after other people's husbands, cursed them fiercely. She said those women deserved to be condemned, despised by society, to face consequences. She said destroying another family was unforgivable, something no emotional story could ever excuse. I did not interrupt. I only watched. I saw her hand tighten around the cup. I heard her voice grow louder and faster, as if those words had already been inside her, waiting for an excuse to spill out. She said if that ever happened to me, she would stand by me to the end. She repeated to the end, like an oath. I nodded. I said yes. I even smiled slightly, the kind of smile you give when you have just received the information you needed. Inside me, there was no burst of anger. I only felt cold and clear. I had just confirmed that Angela suspected nothing, and that she believed she was talking about a stranger. Angela had no idea that the person she was condemning was her own daughter, Emily. She could not know, because she was sitting there in my kitchen, drinking my coffee, believing I was a safe place. I looked at her and thought about all the times I had protected Emily, supported her education, helped her find internships, let her stay with me, took her out to eat, took her shopping. I had believed I was doing the kindest thing. And the strangest part was that I did not want revenge through noise. I only wanted everything to sit in the right place, like documents clipped neatly inside a folder. When the truth arrived, it had to stand firm, steady, leaning on no one. But the crack was already there. Angela just had not seen it yet. And I did not show it to her. I knew that if I spoke then, this kitchen would turn into an emotional battlefield, tears, shouting, denial, then a dirty silence. And the truth, the thing I needed to protect myself, would drown in the chaos. I did not want the truth to die in noise. So I let Angela finish. I let her conclude that she would stand by me. I let her curse someone she did not know carried the last name Brooks. When Angela stood up to leave, she hugged me tightly and told me I was not alone. I closed the door behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen. I did not cry. I only understood one more thing. Sometimes the most dangerous person is not the one who betrays you, but the one who truly believes they are innocent. The truth did not come from Michael. It did not come from Emily either. It did not appear through arguments, secret messages, or the familiar signs people often talk about when it comes to affairs. It came from somewhere colder, quieter, and more precise, a file. That day, I was not looking for the truth. I was doing something very ordinary, something women my age often do without much thought. I was reviewing insurance paperwork, boring, dry documents, full of small print and long terms. I always did this alone, because Michael never had patience for it. He said as long as the premiums were paid on time, that was enough. I was different. I was used to reading carefully, checking details, keeping everything organized in a single folder. I sat at the desk in the living room. Yellow light, a cup of tea gone cold, the heater humming steadily. No music, no particular emotion. I turned page after page, line by line, the way I had done for years. Then I saw a name. At first I thought I had misread it. I stopped. I read it again. I even covered the lines above and below with my hand to make sure my eyes had not slipped. The name listed as the man in the maternity insurance file was Michael Hayes. I did not react immediately. I thought of harmless possibilities. A shared name, a data entry error, someone else's file sent by mistake. My mind moved quickly, but in a controlled way, not in panic. I kept reading. The name of the pregnant person appeared right below, Emily Brooks. This time there was no room for confusion. Full name, date of birth, social security number, contact address. Everything laid out neatly, precise, cold, without emotion. No room for speculation. No room for hope. I sat still. I did not put the file down. My heart did not race. What I felt most clearly was silence in my head, a very clean emptiness, like the moment you place the final piece into a puzzle you have been staring at unfinished for a long time. Everything clicked into place on its own. Michael's changes, his late nights, the way he avoided my eyes, the lip balm in his suit pocket, Emily's averted gaze. None of it floated anymore. Each detail had its place, clear, no explanation required. I closed the file. I put it back exactly where it had been. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and washed my hands. A strange habit, but I needed the feel of cold water on my skin. I looked at myself in the kitchen mirror. My face had not changed much. Not distorted, not pale, just slightly rigid, as if I had crossed a threshold I could not return from. I did not say anything to Michael then. I did not call Emily. And I absolutely did not tell Angela. Not because I hesitated, but because I knew very clearly this was not the time. I understood early in that moment that the truth, if spoken too soon, turns into an emotional story. An emotion is the easiest thing to distort. I did not need a tearful confrontation. I did not need an apology. I did not need explanations. I needed the truth to stand firm. I put the file away the way I keep the most important documents in the house. Not locked too tightly, but not somewhere anyone could touch by accident. I continued living as usual. I cooked. I worked. I spoke with Angela as if nothing had happened. I listened to her talk about Emily with a mother's pride. Each time, I simply noted one more thing. No judgment. No conclusions. I let everything reveal itself at its own pace. I knew that when the truth comes from a medical file, it does not need argument. It does not need proof. It only needs to be placed in the right position, at the right time. And at that moment, the time had not yet come. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because I had moved into a different phase, a phase where I no longer reacted with emotion, but with strategy. I had not told Angela yet. It was not the time. I chose to speak to Michael alone on a very quiet evening. No, Angela. No, Emily. No one else in the house. I did not want witnesses. I did not need an audience. The most important conversations in life do not need spectators. Michael sat across from me at the dining table, the same table we had used for nearly 20 years. There was no food on it, just 2 glasses of water. I remember that moment clearly because it was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. I did not circle around it. I was direct. I told him I knew. I did not say how I knew. I only said that I knew. Michael was not as shocked as I had expected. There was no pale face, no shaking hands. He stayed silent for a few seconds, long enough for me to understand that he had been preparing for this moment for a long time. When he finally spoke, the first thing he said was not an apology. He said he had simply lost his way. The way he said it was calm, like explaining why he was late to a meeting, like a small scheduling mistake rather than a deep cut into our shared life. I looked at him and realized that in his mind, losing his way sounded lighter than betrayal. Then he said he loved her. He said it plainly. No avoidance, no hesitation, as if love were a reasonable explanation for everything. I did not ask when he started loving her. I did not ask why. I understood those questions no longer mattered. Then he spoke about the baby. He said the child was innocent. He placed that sentence like a shield, as if mentioning an unborn life would automatically blur every other responsibility. I realized this was the one line in the conversation that he believed no one could argue against. I did not interrupt. I let him finish. I let him rearrange the story in the way that benefited him most. I let him focus on the parts that allowed him to see himself as a decent man in a bad situation. Then he made his final statement, not in words but in choice. He said he would choose the child Emily was carrying. He did not say outright that he was leaving me, but he made it very clear that he was not choosing the wife who had lived beside him for 20 years. That moment did not feel like a movie scene. There was no shattering sound, no tears. My chest did not tighten. I simply felt one thing being clearly confirmed. I understood that this was not a story of a man being tempted. I was not someone whose husband had been stolen. No one took him from me. This man chose to walk out of his marriage on his own, And what chilled me the most was not that he loved someone else, but that he could sit in front of me, say all of that, and feel no need to apologize. I looked at Michael and realized that this man was no longer the person I had trusted. Not because he had changed, but because I was seeing who he truly was for the first time. A man willing to call betrayal a detour, willing to use love to justify destruction, willing to place an unborn child above every promise sealed by 20 years of shared life. I did not argue. I did not persuade. I did not list what I had done for this family. I did not claim credit. I understood that in that moment, any attempt to hold on was meaningless. A person who has chosen to leave will always find a reason to go. I stood up first. I picked up my glass of water and carried it into the kitchen. A very small action, but enough to end the conversation. Michael did not call after me. He did not ask what I would do next. Perhaps in his mind, the matter was already settled. But for me, it was only the beginning of a different understanding. I was not betrayed by a stranger. I was betrayed inside my own home, by the person I once believed would stand with me to the end. From that moment on, I no longer saw this as a marriage ending because of emotion. I saw it as a problem that needed to be handled with clarity. When emotion is no longer respected, it no longer gets to lead. I did not make a scene. I did not confront anyone. I did not cry. I did not call friends to vent. I did not tell Angela either, even though every time I saw her, I could feel my heartbeat slow by one beat. I chose silence, not because I accepted it, but because I understood very clearly that silence, when used correctly, can be more damaging than any emotional outburst. People around me began to notice the change. I still went to work on time. I still cooked. I still smiled at the right moments. I did not question Michael. I did not check his phone. I did not track his schedule. I let him believe that I had accepted reality. To many people, especially those used to seeing women react with tears, that meant weakness. They were wrong. The first thing I did was separate our finances. Quietly. No announcements. No declarations. I reviewed every account, every expense, every cash flow. I opened my own account. I moved what legally belonged to me into the proper place. I did not take what was not mine. I also did not leave what was mine in a gray area. Everything was done by procedure, by paperwork, by law. At the same time, I preserved evidence. I did not collect it in anger. I recorded it with patience. Messages, appointments, timing, small details that seemed unrelated, but once placed side by side, could not be denied. I stored them the way I store work files, with dates, times, and context. No assumptions. No emotion. I did not tell Angela, not because I cared too much about her, and not because I was afraid of hurting anyone, but because I understood a simple rule. Then everything turns into a loud family drama, where right and wrong dissolve into tears and excuses. I did not need that. I needed the truth to remain intact. I went to see a lawyer, Denise Park. A private meeting, a clean office. No theatrics. No false promises. Denise listened without interrupting. She asked the questions that mattered and ignored what did not. I liked that. We did not talk about revenge. We talked about protecting reputation, rights, and a lawful exit. Denise was very clear. Silence is not weakness if the person staying silent is preparing. She helped me review the entire picture: finances, legal exposure, public image. We built step by step, without rushing. No one except the two of us knew what I was doing. Michael believed I had let go. He grew careless. He spoke less, explained less. At times, he even seemed relieved, like someone who believes the storm has passed just because the wind has gone quiet. I did not correct that belief. I let him keep it. Angela continued to treat me the same. She did not know what I was holding. She did not know what steps I was taking. I listened to her talk about Emily, about the future, about hope. I did not react. I remembered. Not to accuse, but to make sure I never lied to myself again. In everyone's eyes, I became the woman who was betrayed but chose silence, an image that is easily labeled as weak. What they did not understand was that my silence was not empty. It was a sealed space where I was reorganizing my entire life in ways no one could see. I did not need them to understand. I did not need their sympathy. I only needed them to keep underestimating me a little longer. Because when people believe you are weak, they do not guard themselves. And that is always the most fatal mistake. I did not break the relationship. I did not do anything that outsiders could call retaliation. No arguments, no public scenes. I did not bring the story into the light any earlier than necessary. I understood very clearly that relationships that collapse loudly usually leave behind messy ruins. I did not want to clean up debris. I wanted to remove the foundation. Michael still believed everything was being kept intact. He thought I was silent because I was tired, because I was weak, because I no longer had the strength to fight back. He did not realize that while he was looking at the surface of this marriage, I was looking at the structure underneath. And that structure, unfortunately for him, sat entirely within the scope of the law. The first thing I did was review every contract under Michael Hayes' name. I did not rush. I read every clause, every line of fine print. Contracts I once signed in trust, I now read with different eyes. No emotion, no memories. Just text and obligations. I noticed things I had never paid attention to before, not because they were hidden, but because I had trusted. Next came the financial backing, the relationships, the support, the things standing behind Michael's career. I did not cut anything off with words. I adjusted through process. I did exactly what the law allowed, no more, no less. When financial support is built on reputation and family stability, once that foundation shifts, everything above it begins to wobble on its own. I did not need to speak badly about Michael. I did not need to tell my story to anyone in his professional circle. I only needed to withdraw my presence from places where I had quietly stood behind him before. Things once taken for granted were no longer there. And when someone who is used to being supported suddenly has to stand alone, the difference shows very quickly. Inheritance came next, a topic Michael always avoided because he believed it was far off. The law did not agree. I worked with Denise Park to make sure everything was reset in the correct legal order. No disputes, no threats, just rearranging rights according to the new reality. What had once been assumed to belong to Michael was no longer guaranteed. Professional reputation was the final piece, and also the most fragile. Reputation does not collapse because of a scandal, but because of small details accumulating. Subtle shifts in how partners look at you. Opportunities slowing down. Questions beginning to surface. Not asked outright, but noticed by everyone. I did not need to create that. I only needed to stop protecting it. Everything I did was legal. Not a single insult. Not a single step over the line. If anyone looked at the records, they would see only a woman protecting her rights according to the law. Nothing more. Nothing less. Michael began to feel the change but could not name it. He saw contracts slow down. He saw support become less certain. He saw calls come less often. But he never had a clear moment he could point to and say, this is when everything collapsed. And that was the point. Nothing fell apart in one day. It tilted gradually. It sank slowly. Like a house with no foundation. From the outside it still stood, but inside it was no longer safe. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel pleased. I only observed. I knew I was not destroying Michael's career. I was simply no longer holding it up. And when someone builds their entire position on foundations they did not create themselves, removing those foundations causes everything to fall naturally. No loud noise, no dramatic scene. Just a collapse following its own rules. And for the first time since all of this began, I knew I was standing on firmer ground than he was. Only when everything was settled did I invite Angela to meet me. Not earlier. Not later. I did not want this meeting to become an attempt at saving anything. I wanted it to be an ending. When everything has reached where it needs to be, the truth can finally sit still on the table without being pulled off balance by emotion. I asked Angela to come over on a weekday afternoon. Not a weekend, not a holiday, an ordinary enough day that no one prepares for tragedy. She arrived on time, carrying her familiar bag, her face still the face of the friend who had sat beside me for years. She did not suspect anything. She thought this was just another conversation like all the others. We sat in the living room. I poured tea. She held the cup. The air was quiet, not tense. I did not begin with blame. I did not talk about Michael. I did not circle around the point. I did not need an introduction. I placed a folder on the table between us. I did not slide it toward Angela. I simply set it down, gently, straight, the way someone places an important document in a meeting that does not require debate. Angela looked at the folder. She did not ask what it was. Maybe because she trusted me, or because she had never imagined that trust could be used to hurt her. I opened the folder. Not quickly, not with deliberate drama. I opened it to the exact page that mattered. The name Emily Brooks appeared. Clear. Complete. Nothing more needed to be said. I did not say a word. I let Angela read it herself. I watched her as she looked at the page. I saw her face stiffen. Not the kind of shock you see in movies. No dropped cup, no sharp breath, just a very brief moment where every muscle in her face froze, as if locked in place. Angela did not cry. She did not scream. She did not ask me why. She did not say I was mistaken. She just sat there, staring at her daughter's name, as if trying to reread a sentence her mind refused to accept. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner. I did not break the silence. I knew that any words at that moment would be unnecessary. The truth was heavy enough to stand on its own. Angela set the folder down. Her hand trembled slightly, but only a little. She did not cover her face. She did not bow her head. She simply sat upright, staring ahead, like someone who had just realized she had reached the end of a road without knowing it. I did not say when I had found out. I did not tell her what I had done during all that time. I did not explain my silence. I did not need to justify myself. This meeting was not about being understood. It was about the truth being faced. Angela finally looked up at me. That look was no longer the look of a friend. It was not the look of a mother pleading either. It was the look of someone who had realized that some mistakes cannot be fixed, that some moments arrive when every possible choice is already too late. She did not ask me what to do. She did not ask me to keep it secret. Maybe because she understood there was nothing left to save. Not because I was cruel, but because every path toward saving anything had already been blocked by the truth itself. I stood up first. I did not ask Angela to leave. I did not ask her to stay. I only said that I thought she needed time. A neutral sentence, without judgment. Angela left without another word. The door closed very softly. No slam. No drama. But I knew that some doors, once closed, never open the same way again. I stood alone in the living room. The folder was still on the table. Everything had been said, even though no words had been spoken. I did not feel relief. I did not feel more pain. I only felt a very clear, very final state. The truth had finally surfaced. No raised voices, no tears, no winners or losers. Because in that moment, the only thing left was the silence of people who understood that there was nothing left to save. After everything, it did not end with an explosion. There was no scene of someone screaming in the middle of the room. No late apologies. Life simply shifted direction quietly, like a familiar road suddenly turning without a sign. Michael was the first to lose his standing, not in a single day, not through an obvious fall, just one thing at a time, slowly and steadily, slipping out of his hands. Calls were no longer returned quickly. Opportunities no longer came on their own. Polite nods replaced the respect he once had. He was not publicly condemned, but he was no longer standing where he once believed he naturally belonged. Emily faced reality in a harsher way. There were no longer protected spaces around her, no more invisible shelter from adults who once stood behind her. She had to stand alone in her own story, with all the consequences that came with it. No one scolded her. No one attacked her. But no one untangled things for her anymore. The silence of others became the clearest answer. Angela lost more than either of them. She lost her daughter in a way she could not hold on to, and she lost me in a way she could never return from. There was no final argument to close our friendship, no formal goodbye, just a distance that opened and never closed again. Some relationships do not need words to end, because the truth has already spoken. As for me, I left with what belonged to me, No more. No less. My assets were secured in the portion that was mine. My reputation remained intact. My right to motherhood stayed with me. And most importantly, I kept my own autonomy. Not the kind that needs to be declared like a slogan, but the kind that exists quietly in daily decisions. I moved into a different life. Without changing much on the surface, I still went to work, still shopped at familiar stores, still made coffee every morning. But one thing was different. I no longer had to guess where I stood in someone else's heart. I knew exactly where I stood in my own life. Occasionally, I heard people talk about Michael. Their tone was no longer as certain as before. Occasionally, I heard Angela mentioned in unfinished stories. I did not ask more. I was not curious. Those chapters were closed. Someone once asked me if I felt like I had won. I did not answer right away, because I did not see this as winning or losing. No one truly wins in a story like this. There are only those who remain standing and those who no longer can. And I know which group I belong to. The final sentence I said to myself, and the only one I felt I needed, was very quiet. I once protected this family, but not to be betrayed from within. My story does not end with tears. It ends with silence. Not a weak silence, but the silence of someone who has passed through enough chaos to no longer need explanations. I carry no resentment. I carry no trophies. I carry a life that has been put back in the right order. And when all the noise fades, the one who remains is not the loudest, but the one steady enough to move forward without looking back. This story is not about an emotional shock. It is about the moment a grown woman stops comforting herself and begins to see life through facts. When trust is exploited, she does not choose noise to win. She chooses silence to reorganize her life, protect her dignity, protect her rights, and leave cleanly. If this story made you slow down for a moment and see something more clearly in your own life, leave a comment. Thank you for staying and listening until the end. This story is about the moment a grown woman stops talking herself into excuses and starts looking at life through facts. When trust gets used against her, she does not choose noise to prove she is right. She chooses silence to watch, keep evidence, protect her rights, and walk away clean. Sometimes strength is not in what you say, it is in how you stay calm and put your life back in order. If you like family drama that is cold, clear-headed, and flips the table with the truth, hit follow on the channel, drop a comment to tell me what kind of story you want next. Thank you for staying until the end.